The Sinclair Conservatory's glass atrium shimmered with candlelight in San Francisco's elite, all dressed to impress for the annual St. Jude Pediatric Gala. At $12,500, 0 cents a plate, it was the kind of evening where legacies were flaunted and connections sealed over seared scallops and vintage Bordeaux. I smoothed my sleek navy gown, Valentino, classic cut, intentionally quiet, and watched as my stepfather, Martin Caldwell, escorted my mother to their front row table. Her third marriage. His second. My silence. Arden. Martin's voice cut through the murmurs as he spotted me. That polished sneer never changed. Didn't we agree? Staff entrance is through the service corridor. I tilted my head, the same way I had that morning while authorizing the $7 million 0 cents donation from Celestia Ventures to St. Jude, right before the press release was embargoed. For now. I have a seat, I said, holding up the crisp envelope marked with the Celestia seal. Purchased how? He asked coolly. These tables are reserved for our top donors, our family, not fringe participants. My mother placed a hand on his arm, her diamond cuff catching a glimmer. Martin, maybe she can sit near the press table, quietly. He waved her off. Absolutely not. What would the Monroes or the Alvarezes think? She embarrassed us enough last year. He was referring to when he'd loudly accused me of sneaking in, the same night I'd anonymously funded the tech suite that now bore his name, without his clue. I believe there's a lounge near the kitchen, Martin said smoothly, mock empathy dripping. There's a screen. You won't miss anything. It suits your level. As far as he knew, I was 33 and running a niche environmental consultancy that barely made local news. He had no clue that Celestia Ventures, the tech holding firm revolutionizing clean energy, and the one discreetly buying up waterfront assets across the bay, was mine. Of course, I said, giving him the smile I reserved for boardroom opponents who didn't yet know they'd lost. He nodded, pleased. Perhaps next year, if your little endeavor gains traction. I thought of the title deed in my bag, the one confirming I now own the St. Clair Conservatory outright, along with equity in 4 of Martin's major holdings. As I walked toward the back corridor, I passed my stepbrother Chase, ever the golden child, surrounded by aspiring entrepreneurs, likely boasting about his latest Series A round. None of them knew yet that the lead investor, the one who held full control, was already in the building, and headed to the kitchen. For now, funded, of course, by his father's legacy connections. Artie, Chase called out, loud enough to draw attention. That false cheer he always used when trying to win an audience. Still running that adorable little eco shop of yours? Dad might be able to get you an entry-level spot, if you're ready for real work. I thought of the merger contracts waiting in my office, final pages confirming that Celestia Ventures had acquired controlling interest in Stratfield Tech, Chase's supposedly booming startup that had been quietly hemorrhaging investor funds for 2 quarters. Thanks, Chase, I said evenly. I'm managing. He barked a laugh and turned to his entourage. Managin'? He echoed. That's a generous word. Then he added, wait, did you drive that rust bucket hybrid here? You should have parked it behind the kitchen. Don't want it clashing with the Maseratis and Teslas. I gave a small nod. They didn't know the car was intentional, just like the watch I wore, an unbranded field model, and the faded leather clutch I carried. None of them knew I owned the parking management firm that oversaw the Sinclair valet services, or that my personal garage held vehicles their portfolios could barely afford. In the kitchen, the staff greeted me like an old friend. I'd made it a point to learn their names and stories during my routine drop-ins over the past few months. Quiet gestures they never questioned. They didn't know that Celestia acquired the Sinclair Conservatory 2 weeks ago through a shell-holding group. Miss Arden, said Sophia, the head server, handing me a warm espresso. Back here with us again? Wouldn't miss it. I smiled, sliding into the corner seat at the modest staff table. Best view in the house. And it was. From the corridor window, I could see the entire ballroom. Martin at his table, smug and certain, Chase surrounded by flattery, all of them thinking they owned the room. My phone buzzed. Transfer confirmed. Hospital acknowledged. Ready for your cue. I glanced at the time. In 20 minutes, the St. Jude director would take the stage to announce the year's largest donation. Martin, as Gala chairman, would offer his effusive thanks, clueless that the donor was the woman he'd sent to the service hallway. Some canapes, Miss Arden? Sophia asked gently. We saved extras. Thank you, I said, accepting the tray. And Sophia? Remember what I said about polishing your resume? She blinked. Yes, but why? Because starting tomorrow, this place will have a new executive team, and I think you'd make a remarkable general manager. Just then, the lights dimmed. Martin stepped onto the stage, tuxedo tailored to perfection, voice smooth as silk. Distinguished guests, he began. Tonight, we celebrate not just generosity, but legacy. He had no idea how right he was. From my perch by the kitchen doorway, I watched the ballroom shift in unified attention. The Munros, the Alvarezes, those same society families who had followed Martin's example in freezing me out for years. They sat in their curated rows of tables, safe in the illusion of hierarchy. My phone buzzed again. Update. Hospital board reviewing proposed terms, overjoyed about the new pediatric wing. Ready for public reveal pending your go. I smiled faintly. This wasn't just a donation. It was a full blueprint. Architectural plans, eco-sustainable expansion models, and private patient care initiatives designed in tandem with the hospital's lead pediatricians. While Martin had been busy planning a photo op, I'd spent 6 months in strategic meetings, site visits, and private funding negotiations. On stage, Martin cleared his throat, basking in his role. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce this year's gala has already received an extraordinary gift. $5 million. From a benefactor who wishes to remain anonymous. I stood, moved my gown. No, I called out clearly, stepping through the open kitchen doors. I don't wish to remain anonymous. The room froze. Forks suspended in midair. Heads turned. Martin's mask of composure slipped. Arden, he hissed. What are you doing? Get back. I kept walking. Actually, I said, my voice crisp, I think it's time everyone knew who's funding the future of St. Jude's. Chase half rose from his chair, probably signaling the nearest security guard. I met his eyes and smiled. Careful, Chase, you're not going to want to make a scene tonight. I turned to the room and took the mic from Martin's hand, his grip surprisingly weak. I'm Arden Caldwell, CEO of Celestia Ventures, and yes, I'm the one donating $5 million for the new pediatric wing. Gasps followed, then ripples of hurried whispers. Celestia Ventures, the elusive firm acquiring waterfront tech campuses, the quiet investor behind 3 major clean energy startups, the same company Martin had spent the last year begging for a meeting with. This is absurd, Martin choked. Celestia Ventures is a multi-billion-dollar global operation. You run a boutique consultancy. A front, I interrupted smoothly, a way to observe how people behave when they think you're powerless. It's incredible what people reveal when they don't think you matter. Across the room, my mother looked like she might drop her flute of champagne. Arden, sweetheart, what are you saying? I'm saying, I replied, voice steady, that while you've all been following Martin's lead in keeping me hidden, I've been building something far greater than Stratfield Holdings could ever imagine. Chase gave a dry laugh. Seriously? Everyone knows Celestia Ventures is owned by... He stopped. I tilted my head, waiting. If you're as stunned as they were, hit subscribe, because what happens after Arden dropped the final name will change everything. By me, I finished for him, turning to Chase with a quiet smile. Would you like to see the incorporation records? Or maybe the merger agreement showing that Celestia Ventures now holds controlling interests in Stratfield Tech? A ripple of gasps swept through the ballroom. Chase's smirk vanished. Martin's face drained from crimson to ash. That's not possible, he whispered. We'd have known. Would you? I asked gently. Like you knew who bought this venue last month, or who now owns majority shares in the Bayview Club you brag about every weekend, or the investment firm handling your trust? I nodded toward Sophia, who stood at the kitchen doorway. With a subtle press of the remote in her hand, the massive ballroom screens flickered on, displaying a curated slideshow of corporate ownership documents, transfer records, and merger filings. You see, I said, my voice calm over the rising tide of panic, while you were all busy looking down on me, laughing at the quiet girl in the corner, I was building something, a web of influence and ownership that now includes most of the institutions you thought untouchable. The room dissolved into whispers, some frantic, some disbelieving. A few began pulling out their phones. Martin lurched forward, gripping my arm with unexpected desperation. You can't do this. Please, Arden, think about your mother, about our family name. I calmly removed his hand. Family? Like when you made me sit in the valet corridor at your wedding, or when you told the hospital board I was emotionally unfit after I questioned your shady handling of last year's donations? All around us, the Gala descended into an elegant uproar. The Munros scrambled to call their legal counsel. The Alvarezes huddled together, whispering in urgent Spanish. The new reality was setting in fast. The donation? Martin tried again, desperation now audible. Surely this doesn't have to be public. We can talk, just us. I tilted my head. Like when you discussed revoking my college tuition behind my back? Or when you all quietly diverted my inheritance into Chase's doomed ventures? Chase bolted upright. Those weren't failures. We just had short-term liquidity. Sit down, Chase, I said coolly. Unless you'd like me to show your investors what really happened to their money. My phone buzzed again. Final systems go. Ready to push investor transparency docs? I turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice cutting cleanly across the ballroom. Please check your phones. You're about to receive some very enlightening documents. Investment reports, ownership filings, internal audits from Stratfield Holdings and its affiliated trusts. Notification chimes echoed through the grand glass ballroom like a digital symphony of reckoning. Murmurs turned to gasps, gasps to outrage, as San Francisco's elite realized they had been blindsided. By me. My mother, poised and polished, stepped forward, her eyes glistening. Why? She asked, voice trembling. Why go through all this trouble? Because some lessons, I said quietly, require more than words. About judgment, about the assumption that status makes you superior, about the way you treat people who aren't sitting at your table. I turned toward the kitchen entrance. Sophia? I called. She stepped forward, hesitant but radiant. I've just been named the new general manager of the Sinclair Conservatory, she said, then glanced at me with nervous pride. Miss Caldwell promoted me this morning. The ballroom erupted again. Martin's face flushed purple. You can't do that, he barked. She's just... A what? I asked, my tone cool and sharp. Staff? Someone you assumed didn't deserve a seat at this table? That's exactly the mindset I'm here to dismantle. I tapped my phone. The screens flickered once more. Effective immediately, Celestia Ventures is rolling out new policies across all managed properties, merit-based advancement, wage transparency, and equity audits for all executive positions. I turned toward Martin, and yes, a full audit of executive expenses, including yours. You'll destroy everything, Chase snapped. No, I replied calmly. I'll rebuild it, in a way that actually means something. I nodded toward the hospital director, who had been standing silently watching this power shift unfold. The new pediatric wing? It'll be named after Sophia's son, Mateo. He couldn't get treatment here 3 years ago, because your philanthropic board denied their application. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. I was the anonymous donor who covered his bills, I added gently. And this donation, this is only the beginning. Celestia Ventures is launching a permanent foundation, one that guarantees no child will ever be denied care based on who their parents are or what they can afford. Martin collapsed into his seat, finally understanding what he had lost. This wasn't just a show of wealth. It was a restructure of power, of legacy, of who would decide what matters going forward. To all of you, I said, addressing the room, your memberships at the Bayview Club, the Nautilus Yacht Club, the Estate Wineries, you'll be reevaluated, not based on your family name, I said, voice unwavering, but how you treat others, especially those you thought were invisible. And Martin, I said, turning to my stepfather one last time, you might want to check your personal accounts. His jaw twitched. Celestia's forensic team uncovered some fascinating discrepancies. The SEC will be very interested in your handling of the hospital's charitable funds. Security stepped forward, not to escort him politely to the door, but to guide both Martine and Chase into the side vestibule where two federal agents waited silently. I stood still for a moment, watching the same men who once ordered me through service entrances now face an entirely different kind of threshold, one they couldn't walk back through. My mother approached, her diamond earrings swaying with each shaky breath. Her carefully groomed mask finally cracked. All these years, she whispered, we thought we were the ones who had it all. Success isn't about show, I replied softly. It's about building something that lasts, something that lifts others. The next morning, headlines across San Francisco's media landscape told the story in their own way. Celestia shocks the Bay. Heiress in the shadows reshapes power structures. St. Clair Ball turns into scandal. From staff table to CEO. Arden Caldwell's billion-dollar reveal. But they missed the real story. This wasn't about revenge. It was about transformation, of a hospital, of a broken social model, and of the very definition of dignity and worth. Because sometimes, the best kind of justice isn't destroying someone's empire, it's building one that outshines it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person they banished to the kitchen turns out to own the entire building. As I stepped out into the crisp night air, Sophia beside me, the quiet murmurs of the same elite who once ignored me followed like shadows. Their eyes clung to me now, not with disdain, but with desperate curiosity. The woman they had underestimated now held the levers of their legacy. What happens now? Sophia asked. Now? I smiled. Now we show them what real class looks like, not by keeping people out, but by bringing them in. My phone buzzed once more. A message from Martin's attorney, likely begging for some last-minute settlement or reputational band-aid. I deleted it without reading. Because the best revenge? It isn't served cold. It's served with kindness, opportunity, and the resolve to build something better. And as I drove away in my modest, well-worn hybrid, I thought of tomorrow's board meeting, where the kitchen staff would sit at the table and the old guard would learn what it meant to truly earn their place. After all, power isn't about exclusion. It's about who you choose to uplift. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or pushed aside, leave a comment below and let me know. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent or stepped into the light? I read every message, and your support reminds me why I built what I did, not for revenge, but for transformation. For every Sophia out there waiting for a chance, if you believe in that kind of power, not power to exclude, but power to uplift, subscribe and stay with me, because this isn't the end, it's the blueprint for what comes next. And here's my advice. Never let anyone else's definition of your worth become your truth. Build quietly, build smart, and build with purpose. When the time comes, don't shout, show. And when they finally turn to listen, make sure you're standing tall, not just for yourself, but for those they never saw coming.